3, 2, 1, and hello there, internet, students, and everyone who is watching today. Myself and Naomi are here today to talk to you all about understanding the question, which is a topic that I'm really looking forward to doing. I've wanted to do a live stream about this since we said we were going to do the live streams, and luckily we had 2 students give us feedback that this is something that they would like to hear. So, Naomi, would you like to introduce yourself and the session?
Yes, so I'm Naomi. I work in the skills team in the library at the University of Derby, as does Alex. And as Alex had just said, this is a very student-driven live stream. It's a question that we've been asked, so we have responded to that, and we're doing this lovely live stream. So if you yourself have questions that you want us to address in future live streams, let us know. There's billions of ways you can get in touch with the library to let us know if any way you chose to get in touch with the library would get through to us eventually. So you could live chat, you could email, you can leave a comment on YouTube. This is where I fall down with understanding how these things work, but let us know and we will absolutely do that. So, and this is what we've done here. We've had questions about understanding the question, and we are live streaming on the topic. So yes, we are very excited about that.
I am indeed excited about it, and one of the reasons I'm particularly excited about it is because when I was a student, this is something that, well, I still am a student, but when I was actually in my first year of being a student, this is an area that I fell down on, and I want to help students avoid the similar mistake that I made, just as I have done since then. So understanding the question is really, really an important topic, because ultimately, if you don't understand the question, you won't get the marks that you deserve. So no matter how much research you do, no matter how much work you put into an assignment, you could fall down. And that's exactly what happened to me. So my first year, I was given a question about judges and how they act, and I just completely got it. I went off on a tangent for basically the entire essay. And it was a really good tangent. It was a very critical tangent. It worked. It was great. The lecturer said, well researched, good, well written, but not what I wanted, so I got capped. And luckily, that was my first year, so it didn't count towards my main grade, but I felt quite sad that had happened to me, but luckily that hopefully won't happen to you if following this workshop and the advice that we give.
Yes, I think it's really interesting because often it's something that I say this all the time about so much of the stuff we talk about. On the one hand, it looks really straightforward, and then on the other hand, it looks really complex. And we're always trying, I think, to strike that line in between the really straightforward and the really complex, as it were. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but you could read a question and think, that's really straightforward, I can do that, but you've not thought through enough. Or you can get really bogged down in this question, how am I going to work this out? This is far too complicated, and we don't want that either. It's that middle point where you give it just the right amount of thought and attention.
Yeah.
Not too little, not too much. And like I said, that goes for so much of what we do. It's both very straightforward and very complex at the same time, and somehow we find that balance between the two.
Yes, and I really think that this is an important area not to underthink, but also not to overthink. So we'll give you some tips and advice about how to properly do that. So the first thing that we're going to discuss today is understanding the question, but we're also going to talk about some other things. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the other things we'll be talking about today. So Naomi's going to be showing you some... So first, other than talking about understanding the question, Naomi's going to be showing you some resources you can use to understand the question. And I'm going to be talking about backwards planning and give you an activity that you can take home and do yourself in your own spare time.
Can I just chip in? Sorry,
yeah,
Alex, I'm interrupting. It makes me smile about backwards planning. We ran a time management workshop, which I had prepared, and then I was off sick, so Alex and Tim weren't sure if I was going to be able to come back to do the time management session. So Alex then put one together as well, and it definitely included backwards planning. And then I was back in time, so I ran the session, and I could feel Alex wanting to talk about backwards planning. It was because it wasn't subtle, to be fair. He told me he wanted to talk about backwards planning, but I could sense it. And I did let you talk a little bit about backwards planning in the session, didn't I? But yes. So I'm glad that Alex has his opportunity to talk fully about backwards planning. And then what I can do when that's made into a nice little video, subscribe to our YouTube channel to get our video notifications when our videos are released, we can make that backwards planning bit into a video. And then when I next run the time management session, if I want to, I can include that video clip in my time management session to say, look, here is Alex talking about backwards planning.
So I don't even have to be there.
You don't even have to be there.
That's the worry with these things, is you'll do workshops where you just put a video of me just talking on them. But today we're talking about understanding the question. So, Naomi, I've told you why it's important to understand the question, but how can I understand the question?
So, really good first step. And this, again, is going to sound so obvious, but read the question. So read it to yourself, read it slowly, read it more than once. You could try different ways, experiment with different ways about how you're just going to initially read that question. So it might be worth speaking it out loud. It might be worth writing it out. It might be worth changing it into different fonts, different colors. Experiment with how you are going to get the most out of reading that question, but do it more than once. Take your time over it. Don't just glance at it. This is what we're talking about, underthinking it. Don't just glance at it and think, yep, I've got that, and go and get on with things. Different people work in different ways. We talk about this a lot as well, and some people are very much right, I want to get on and do things. But if you're that kind of person, give yourself the time just to stop, because doing one of the things you can do is reading that question. So take your time to do that.
Yeah,
sorry. No, carry on.
I was going to say, whenever I get a question, I always read it a few times. I don't just read it once. Sometimes I'll read it before I even annotate it or do anything to that question, just to get your head around exactly what that is and what that means. In the proofreading workshop yesterday, I read a question out 3 times before I properly understood it and got what it meant. And that's just what I do with a real question.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as you're reading it through, you can then start breaking that question down into different parts. So I think the first thing I would try and pick out is what topics you're being asked about. So what exactly is this question about in relation to what you are studying? So the example I have thought of, this may fall apart as an example, but we'll run with it, is I was thinking about zoo animals. If your question asks you talks about zoo animals, or that's what you're studying zoo animals, but your question might ask you about zoo animals, it might ask you about zebras, it might ask you about maneless zebras, which is a particular type of zebra without a mane, and you need to ascertain which of those you are being asked about. So if your question is asking you to talk about maneless zebras, a particular variety of zebra, and you answer talking about all zoo animals or even all zebras, you are not going to be answering that question. Equally, if your question is asking you to talk about all zoo animals and all you do is talk about zebras, again, you're missing huge parts of what you could talk about and what that question is asking you to do. So look at the topics, don't make assumptions based on what you want to talk about. You might really love zebras, but if the question is asking you to talk about all zoo animals, you're going to have to talk about the penguins as well. Can you tell it's lockdown? My favourite place to visit is shut, which is the zoo. Yes. So I'm just bringing it in. There are both zebras and penguins at the wildlife park that we visit a lot. Anyway, so you need to identify those topics. It might be that you've had a lecture on a particular bit of this topic or particular keywords, but don't assume that your question will match up exactly with what the lecture topic was. Make sure you're looking at that question specifically and identifying exactly what it is asking you for. And then once you've worked out those topics, look for your instruction words. So the ones that immediately come to mind for me are compare and contrast. So those are words that are telling you what they want you to do about that topic. So I thought, and then I was thinking about this. I think, well, what is the difference between compare and contrast? Compare to me would be looking at two things next to each other and looking for things that are both the same and different, whereas contrast would be looking at things that are just different. Would you agree, Alex?
Yes, I would agree. Although I'd always define what the word means and probably use a dictionary type thing to actually work out.
We'll come to that later. Yes. But yes, so look for those words. So compare, contrast, discuss, analyze, all these kinds of words. That's the person who set the question telling you how they want you to approach the topic. So you need to ascertain exactly what the topic is and how they want to approach it. Now, it's likely your question is going to be more complex than this. You might not just have one topic, there might be more than one topic. You might not just have one instruction word, there might be more than one instruction words. But try and identify these different things. And then also look again, are there any other words in there that look important? Make sure you've considered every word that's in that question and whether it has an impact on what you're going to write. So another example, Alex and I were talking about this yesterday. An example that Alex had used included the word impact. It asked the person answering the question to think about the impact of some regulations. And that's actually a really important word as well. So if you're being asked to talk about the impact of something, make sure you were talking about the impact of it, not the thing itself. That's a very different thing to talk about the impact of something or the thing itself. So I'm going to use, can I go with another zebra analogy? Is that annoying? Or shall I carry on with? So this is really, really just basic popping into my head at the moment. But there's a difference between being asked to describe a zebra and being asked to describe the impact that a zebra has on its environment. Huge difference there. They might, elements of the two might come into each other, but it's a very different focus of what you're being asked to do. So make sure you've thought about all those words. And like I said initially, when you're reading your question, experiment with how that might work. So like I say, type it out on your computer, make different bits of it different colors, or put it all onto different mind maps. So you've got mind maps for your instruction words and mind map for your topics and all that kind of thing, and really explore that question. If you're not the kind of person that works visually, collar someone and talk to them about it. Talk them through the question. Get them to ask you questions about the question. There's all kinds of ways that you can explore and get your brain to think further and deeper into that question. So have a play around and see what works for you.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. What I think is the most key part of that is what the key words are and what the subject words are, and knowing what they mean and how to actually apply that to the question. So you said about impact, and so you really got to, the words that are in the question can really affect what the question is. So something which I think is vastly important is understanding what those questions are. And so I would recommend doing some research and trying to define those subject words, the keywords that you might find, and the instruction words. So there are a number of ways to do this. So for the subject words that are specific to the subject area that you study, I would always recommend having a look at the past lectures that you've had, because sometimes the lecturer might have defined those words within the class that you've had. They may be defined in the recommended reading that you've been given. So have a brief look at some of the recommended reading that you've been given before you then do further research, just so you get your head around the question. Another place that you can go if you are feeling very confused about an area is Wikipedia. And this is sometimes viewed as quite controversial, but we've said this a few times in this live stream, which is actually Wikipedia, as long as you don't necessarily quote it, can be a very good place to get, first of all, research questions from, and to get a basic understanding of what you're actually going to be saying into your head. And I think that it can be really useful as well for further sources, because Wikipedia often gets the information from sources. You can then use those as a springboard for your research. So
if you're looking at Wikipedia and it's not referencing any sources that it's got the information on, then take that into account as to how much you are relying on the Wikipedia article.
But it can then help you to then come up with some initial research questions based on those subject information, which you can then take to your recommended reading. You can then take it to your search engines, and it can really help you to get in your head what things you're going to ask to explore the topic.
Yeah.
Because
I think that's a really good point. Sorry, Alex. That all this work will help you at other points in your assignment as well. So as you just said, if you have done a mind map really thinking about what your terms mean, you can then use those when you are searching for articles.
Yeah.
That's already given you a list of search terms. So it's all worth doing.
Yeah, because there's no point just searching the exact word that's actually being given to you. Sometimes it's worth defining that word and coming up with words from that definition. So I often, and this is something I say to do with instruction words as well, is I often just go to Google and just look up what they mean by typing in define and then the word. You could find more academic definitions within books, so you might want to look at the glossary of some of the recommended readings that you've been given, or for the specific keywords or instruction words that are within a question, I would actually recommend looking at something called Bloom's taxonomy, which is what Tim would be wishing that I say at the moment, because that has a definition of all of those things. So I'm just going to show on screen the Wikipedia article for that. So just going to switch.
I honestly have to say, at this juncture, I have no idea what Bloom's taxonomy is. And I can't even see the screen that Alex is sharing unless I look on my phone where I've got the stream going. But that's 10 seconds behind.
Let's say you've been given a question and you don't know what Bloom's taxonomy is. Instead of doing before you do any big research, you can actually get a summary of that by looking at Wikipedia. Don't look at Twitter.
Not going to look at Twitter.
You can find a summary of that by looking at Wikipedia, which is what I've just pulled up. So I've just pulled up the Wikipedia entry, but for each of the different keywords that you might get within a question or instruction words, they're there. So you've got evaluation, for example, and it tells you what you need to do to evaluate. The same with synthesis, which may be another instruction word that you're given to synthesize information. So that could be a good place to look up an academic definition of what you need to do. And if you don't understand any of those words, you can look them up too.
Does it say who Bloom was?
I assume Bloom was a person.
Yeah, no, I know, but I want to know who that person was. You carry on, Alex. I'm going to look up Bloom's taxonomy in Wikipedia.
So, Naomi, we're back on screen now.
Wonderful.
So, yes, that was Bloom's taxonomy, which is a place that you can go and find information for those words. With your keywords, something that also might be worth doing with your question, so the subject word, is to actually look up synonyms of those words. So let's say I wanted to look up the word impact, as I was told earlier, and actually I'm going to get this back up as a tab on Google.
Can I just say,
yeah.
Benjamin Bloom. Benjamin Bloom is a lovely name. But also with collaborators, I'm now feeling a bit sorry for the 1, 2, 3, 4 other people that published it with him.
Poor other people.
Benjamin Bloom stole the limelight there. I feel a bit sorry for them.
I've just gone to Google and I've just typed in define impact. And that will then tell me what impact means, but it also tells me similar words below it, which I could then help to use in my research questions, at least the relevant ones. Something else you can do is do impact, and then, as you see, it's come up under it, probably because I've typed it so many times, the word synonym. This will then give me a list of all the words with similar meanings to impact. They don't always have the same meanings. In academic sense, you may notice that a lot of these are about crashes, but the second definition has effect, influence, impression, so they may be things that you want to search when you're doing your work. So rather than just using the word impact, now we've got all these other words that we can look for, if that's what you want to search.
Tim says we shouldn't that Bloom's taxonomy is not the be-all and end-all.
Okay,
and
Tim.
That we should be reading textbooks that discuss Bloom's taxonomy.
I see. Very good. I would agree with that as well then, Tim, because Bloom's taxonomy is...
Because we agree with Tim just as a matter of course.
Cool.
That's not critical at all. We should be critical about our agreement with Tim.
Don't worry, I am very critical about my agreement with Tim. Using those synonyms and using those definitions of the question, what I then recommend doing is trying to work out some initial questions that you need to answer from the text. So if you've been given a question, split that up into sub-questions that you want to answer, and then that can help you with your planning, because then you will work out these are the things that I need to address to hit every single element of the question. And these can almost be used to create initial structure, so you could have a paragraph where you try to answer this element, a paragraph where you answer this element. Obviously, once you've done a bit of research, go back to that planning and structure and reconsider it, relook at the question and think, is this correct? Was my understanding of the question still right now that I've done all this research on it? But that can be something that's really useful to do. So
I think it's amazing, these things, we're talking about understanding the question, but already we've got search terms that we're going to start off with when we're starting to look for articles. Mm-hmm. We've got the basics of a structure. We know where we're going to begin exploring this topic in full. We've made a really good start, essentially. Yeah. So none of this work is in vain or a waste of time. It all adds up and builds up to your beautiful assignment.
Yeah. It all comes into it. So yesterday I was doing my proofreading workshop and I was discussing how actually at the end of the workshop you should look at the assignment brief and you should also look at the information you've been given to help define that question. But actually that's something that if you do at the understanding stage, you should already have in place. So I had an exercise where I said to make a proofreading checklist Well, that's what you can do at the start. But instead of a checklist, an aims list. So these are the things I will achieve when I do it. And then you can check that back when you go to when you actually go to proofread your work to make sure you've done those things. Yeah. So if you do it at the start, it makes it so you don't have to redefine your essay as much when you're at the end of that process. But speaking of the assignment brief, Naomi...
I was going to say, Alex, you just mentioned the assignment brief.
How can that be useful?
Another smooth transition, as ever. Yes, so this... I want to talk about how your question does not stand alone. Your question is very much in the context of the module you're studying, of the subject you're studying, and you will get more information about the question and understanding it from other sources. So you might be given an assignment brief. Different modules, different courses will use different terminology, and you might get something that's got at the top of it, assignment brief. That would be wonderful. But you should certainly have the learning outcomes for your module. You should be given information about the word count, about presentation. You might have information on all kinds of things, and all that comes into your questions. So again, going back to our question about zebras, you could write a wonderful assignment that talks all about all the right kinds of zebras and the impact they're making on their environment. But if it is half the amount of words that you're supposed to write, you are not going to have answered that question. You've not fulfilled that assignment brief. So think about any written information you've been given. So ideally, you'll be given this information written down, word count, presentation, all that kind of thing. You might need to do it double spaced, space and a half. There might be requirements for your course as a whole. Think about what referencing style you've been asked to use. Hopefully, you've got all this information written down. And if you are unclear about any of it, then talk to your lecturer or whoever's marking your assignment and just clarify what they want from you. But also, think again. So we talked about how your topic might relate to a lecture subject. Think about the subject of that lecture. There'll be more information there. Your lecturer may have said some things to you verbally. There might have been a session that's dedicated to helping you get your head around this assignment. If there is a session dedicated to helping you get your head around the assignment, go to it. That would be my advice there. Take advantage of all the help and support that you are being offered, because you will be being offered it. And we've said before, what were we talking about last week? I should know this. What was our live stream? Tim, what was our live stream on?
Referencing, avoiding a horror show.
Oh, yes. So we were talking then about, I think it was then, we were talking about how nobody actually wants you to fail. So the help and support is there. And if you are unclear about what you're being asked to do in any way, then go back and clarify and check, and definitely take advantage, like I say, of all the information that will be presented to you. But make sure you bear all these things in mind when you're thinking about your question. Anything you've got written, anything that's been said to you, any questions you might ask, make sure that you're taking all that into account.
I think something that you raised there is also useful with speaking to people outside, or anything that's been said to you outside of the assignment by your lecturer or by the staff who work on the marking team for that lecture, that assignment. If there are any gaps within the assignment brief or within the question that you've been given, which actually you think, I need to know this, don't be afraid to ask it, because the worst thing that can be said to you is no. And I've often found that, especially in my first years before we had proper assignment briefs, there would be things that weren't told to us, like, what counts within the word count and what doesn't. Because that's really important to know, because that can be lots of words. Is there a 10% variance? Sometimes some courses might have a strict rule, yes or no. Mine always seem to have a 10% variance, but other courses don't. So if it is sometimes there and sometimes not, do make sure that you know, because you don't want to get your mark reduced by being over, but you also don't want to have missed the opportunity to use them words if you can use them words. So do ask questions if there are gaps, and that is something that I would always do as a matter of course, because like I say, the worst thing that they can say is, no, I'm not going to tell you that. But yes, so that is our coverage of the assignment brief and also understand the question. But now it's time for our topic of the week, and this is given to us by student feedback.
What about identifying when you're on the right track for answering the assignment question?
Our topic of the week...
Alex is not looking at the Word document.
Our topic of the week is how to identify when you're on the right track.
I thought our topic of the week was understanding the question. I'm so confused.
Okay, I'll tell you in a second. So our topic of the week for this week is how to identify when you're on the right track for answering the assignment question. So this has been brought to us by student feedback from students, and it's actually something I've been wanting to address for a while. So we've come together and we've come up with a number of points of advice. I think we've got an odd number. I think it's 5. Yeah, we've got 5 pieces of advice for how you can make sure that you're on the right track when you're answering the question. And a lot of this is finding ways of checking and going back and considering and consolidating what you know about the question. And the first piece of advice that I have is when you are researching, when you are writing, always have that question visible and keep checking it back, because if you don't keep checking it, or you check it once at the start and then you do all your research and then check it again, you might realise that you've gone off on a tangent, or you've spotted something interesting and gone down that rabbit hole, or you might find that you've only covered one element in a lot of depth but not another. So always keep that question in mind, and if you've started with research questions and questions to answer, that can help you to make sure you've actually hit everything. But always look back to the question just to make sure that you're on the right lines when researching, and add those checks and balances in. So I'd say look back at it when you're researching, look back at it when you're writing, look at it again when you're proofreading. Throughout the process, keep making sure that you've checked to make sure that you're answering the question and every element of that question that you're supposed to. So, Naomi, do you have any advice on this matter?
Yes, although I'm going to talk about that for a bit first. I love a tangent. We record podcasts. You can find our podcasts on all major podcasting platforms.
So it's Derby Uni Podcast. University of Derby Skills Podcast.
University of Derby Skills Podcast on all major podcasting platforms. I do enjoy recording our podcast, but I do go down tangents. But the listeners to our podcast don't really know this, because Alex edits most of them out. There's some beautiful tangents in unreleased footage. Maybe at one point we should just release a podcast just of all my tangents. It won't be relevant to anything at all. It'll just still be all my tangents. There was a beautiful one. See, if I do it on the live stream, Alex can't edit it out. And there was a beautiful one where I talked quite a bit about In the Night Garden. That didn't make it to the final cut.
It did not.
It didn't.
I think I took out about a 10-minute clip of you just talking about irrelevant things for 10 minutes. Because that's not answering the question.
So this is something I definitely need to do. I keep myself on topic, and I think that's a really good point. Actually, that has never occurred to me to do when I'm answering questions. Actually, keep the question there. Maybe I should do that for podcasts. Keep the question visibly in front of me. So I want to talk my point about, and this is about points. So we talk sometimes about structuring your paragraphs, and we talk about point, evidence, explain, sometimes criticize, link. For paragraph structure, we've got some great videos on that on our channel. Check them out. But the first bit of that is the point. So if you have organized your paragraphs into a point, evidence, explain structure, you should be able to very quickly find your point. You should know what that point is. You should ideally know what the point of your paragraph is. Generally, that's the whole idea. So check that point, each individual point in each individual paragraph, is relevant to your question. So this will help you with word count, it will help you with relevance, all sorts of things. Look at your point and check, is that answering the question? Is it relevant? Does it impact on what I'm trying to say? Alex, your turn. I've
just put on screen a YouTube video that we discuss that paragraph structure in depth, that you can then go back to and have a look at, and that can really help you to keep relevance and to make sure that what you're talking about is actually relevant to the question. So I would recommend checking that out for a general assignment, but there's always that key question at the end, which is how does this paragraph actually answer the question, where you link back what you said in that paragraph using the keywords that are in it to show this is how it's answered. And that I have found has always been a really good rule of thumb to me, to try and make it as clear as I can. This is how I've answered it. Because if you can say, look, this is how my work is relevant, then that can help you to prove that you're actually answering the question. Whereas if you read a paragraph back and you go, actually, how is this relevant? Or you're clutching at straws as to how it is, you might then realise that it's probably time to reevaluate that, or to find ways of making it more relevant. And if you can't do that, then just scrap it and find something that is more relevant to use. Pardon me.
And I would say with regard to that, if you believe that it is relevant, but you think I've not actually made that point well enough, definitely take the time to make that relevance visible. I'm going to gazump Alex, because Alex is just about to talk about reading around the subject area. So when we say make sure that what you're putting is relevant to the question, it doesn't mean that you need to be narrow necessarily, because it might be that a point that you learnt about in a different part of the module, or a point that you learnt in another module entirely, is relevant to your question. So don't be scared of that, and that's when you start. That's when you're flying. In my opinion, is when you start pulling those links between modules, between ideas, between topics. So don't be afraid of something. Don't keep your confidence that point's relevant. If you know that point is relevant, keep your confidence in that, and just make sure you are explicitly showing how that point is relevant. So again, it's this balance between being too narrow and too broad.
I think that's a very, very important point, Naomi. It's you shouldn't look at a module within the small chamber of knowledge that's within that. You should look at it by the broader frame of what you've learned, and obviously make sure that is relevant, and make sure to justify why it's relevant, and do talk about things that have been mentioned within that module. But don't be afraid to actually talk about things that are wider, because wider research can first of all tell you if you've missed something, but it can also enhance what you've talked about. So don't be afraid of going over the limits of what you've been taught, provided that you can explain why it's relevant and how it helps to answer the question.
Yeah.
My cat is...
Oh, Alex, I heard
You heard that? You heard that?
I heard the cat. Bless her. Are you going to let her in? I can talk about my next point once you let the cat in.
I will do. Just give me...
What's her name?
Gimli.
Gimli. Is she a she?
Yes.
Or he? You should know that question, Alex. Alex has gone to let Gimli in. So my next tip is to talk to someone about it, and this can be really useful if you find someone that doesn't know anything about your subject. You can talk them through the points you've made and check that they think you've answered the question, or give them a draft of your assignment or a plan or anything like that. But ask someone else's opinion. That can be really, really key. And someone without subject knowledge might have that fresh perspective that they can then say, actually, I don't think you have answered. If they don't understand your answer to the question or how you've answered the question, then it might be that you've not answered it yet. So talk to someone can be a really good idea. I'm just looking.
I walked off, but I didn't mute my mic. I turned my video to capture off.
Alana's giving more information about the cat that Alex failed to give, so thank you, Alana. I need this context. Alex, you're not giving enough detail about the cat. You thought that the cat was male.
Oh, no.
So you named him Gimli, but then it turned out that she was female.
Apologies for any background noise then, by the way. I forgot to mute my mic when my cat was walking around. I just turned off my video instead.
I think Gimli's a lovely name for a cat.
Yeah, son of Gloin.
My cat's called Salmon.
If you could hear the cat meowing, I'm sure you could probably hear her walking over my desk. Ow. Cool. So, I don't actually know what you just said, Naomi, but have you just discussed the point about asking a friend with no subject knowledge?
I have, yes.
You have?
As per the plan, yes.
So speaking about asking friends, we've asked
smooth!
We've asked some students for some advice relating to what their first steps are when they first receive an assignment. If you have any tips that you would like to share with us, feel free to add them within the chat today. But we've got 2 student tips that we have today that I'm going to read out now, and Naomi, if she wants to, can comment on them. So the first tip from students is, the first steps for me are to highlight the key terms in the question, and to make sure I understand them before doing anything else. And again, that's exactly what we've been saying, so that student is on the right lines. Make sure you understand what you're expected to do, and do it.
Yeah. Feedback, I'm just thinking in terms of identifying those key terms. If you've had feedback in the past that you have not answered a question properly, it might be worth going back to that feedback, looking at the feedback specifically, looking at your previous questions in that light, and seeing if you can see which key terms you missed, because that might really help you develop that skill.
Yes, I agree. Sorry if I'm distracted by stroking my cat.
I am pleased that the cat's in here. I think it's much more amusing.
I don't think... You can't see what's on the stream. I don't think the cat's actually made it onto the stream yet. But she's walked around...
I could see her tail earlier.
Yeah, Naomi has a different camera that she can see me out of than the camera that's been used for the stream.
I forgot that.
Oh, yeah, I don't know if I even told you. But yeah, the second piece of advice from students that is really, again, useful is that their first step is to put the important assignment dates in their calendar. And actually, that is something that I do straight away. Make sure you know when it's in for, because getting it out by a week, that can put you in trouble. So do know when it's in for, and do make sure that you have that solidly planned out. And actually, that links to something I'll talk about later on in the session about backwards planning, because that's the first thing that I'm going to do when I show you a backwards planning timeline. So thank you, students, for both reaffirming what we've said and also foreshadowing into what we're going to say. So, that was our topic of the week that we brought to you, understanding the question. For context about why Naomi got confused earlier is because I was meant to play that graphic at the start of the section rather than midway through. But it's such a good graphic, I didn't want to waste it.
It was a good graphic. It's a new one. We've got snazzy new graphics. We're always innovating, and I say we, and that is entirely our lovely colleague Steve, is always innovating with our graphics, and it's all very exciting. I like the stamp in particular. I'm going to talk about this whilst Alex worries about his cat. I like the stamp in particular because it's very retro library vibes. So back in the day in the library, you'd be like stamp, stamp, stamp. And I like that. We don't do enough stamping of things in the library anymore.
The only thing that's currently been stamped is my cat, who's stamping her feet and staring at me until I feed her. But I guess I can't go away.
This happened last week.
It did,
Did this not happen last week?
She's obviously learned that when I live stream. It's probably because I'm talking more.
Yes.
Oh, she's staring into the camera now, but you can't see her.
I'm doing the next bit of talking, but I need you to do screen sharing, Alex.
You need me to screen share, don't you? So
do you want me to just talk for 5 minutes?
No, I'll sort. I'm gonna be happy to sit here. She can sit here and be the guest star. So
I'm worrying about Gimli now.
She's fine. She can get fed in 20 minutes. So what we do next then, Naomi? So we always like to have a section where we highlight library resources, don't we? So what library resource would you like to shine a spotlight on today?
We're going to highlight an ebook called How to Write Better Essays. Now, Alex, are you screen sharing?
I am currently on the library homepage.
Awesome.
Can you see the stream on your phone?
Yes, but it's 10 seconds behind and it will confuse me.
Okay.
So I'm just going to talk and I'm going to trust Alex to click along as I talk. So on the library homepage, we're going to show you the way to get through that goes through our skills guide, because then you can see our skills guide as well on the way. It's like when you point out interesting things as you drive past in the car. So if you scroll down on the library homepage, you can get to the library homepage directly, www.derby.ac.uk/library. You can go through Udo, you could Google or other search engine to search for Derby Uni Library. Get to the library homepage, scroll down, there's a box called Find Subject Information. And if you click on that, you'll get to our wonderful library guides page. Millions is an exaggeration. Lots of library guides here on lots of different subjects. If you've not seen this page before, go there right after this stream ends and look at it properly. At the bottom of that, because it's alphabetical, we've got skills guides, which Alex, I'm sure, is going to click on or has done already. And then if you go to our academic writing skills guide, you will then see a tab called Understanding the Question. And that's got lots of information there. And also, for the purposes of this, on the right-hand side, on a computer screen, it might look different on a mobile screen. There's a box titled Resources, and it links through to our Biblio ebook collection. This is a great collection of study skills books. Again, if you have any, if you want to explore any study skills topics further, this is a really good place to start because there's loads of stuff here. It's brilliant. And the book I want to talk about is called How to Write Better Essays. Now, a really key thing I wanted to say when I was thinking about this resource spotlight of the week, because there aren't really many books called Understanding the Question. I've ran a session on note-taking, and there aren't many books called note-taking. But there's loads of information about these things, and you want to be looking, when you're looking for resources, don't just look at the book titles, take a look at the chapter titles as well. So this book has got, its entire first section is called Interpretation of the Question. There's lots of chapters on it. It's a really big part of this book. You might not necessarily think that from the title, How to Write Better Essays. You've got to go further into it and find those section titles, those chapter titles. So yeah, just wanted to highlight all those things really. The Biblio ebook collection, we've got loads of ebooks generally. We've got loads of books in the libraries as well, but that's not the easiest at the moment, but lots and lots of ebooks. And make sure, like I say, you are looking at these more generally titled books will often have chapters specific to these different topics. So, how to write better essays? One of the ways you can write better essays is to understand your question, and that is very much part of this book. I'm highly amused by Alex and his cat. Oh, did she go for you, Alex?
I tried to show her in the window. In fairness,
Hey, is your camera on screen at the moment?
yeah, it is. Oh no, it's not. It's not.
No, everybody missed Alex's cat. Make a swipe at him. That was good. We should definitely have more cat content.
I think she just sat in the window, so I was just like, I shut the curtain so that she'd be out of the way, because usually she just sits there. So I was like, oh, it'll be fine. But she was not happy. So sorry, Gimli.
I'm sad we were screen sharing at that
She's dead
point.
eyeing me. I'm so sorry. I will feed you afterwards.
Just tried to shut her behind a curtain.
I did.
Right.
So yes, do feed your cats. That is what I would recommend. Not feeding cats is not the best piece of advice I would give, but if only I thought about that afterwards when I was playing my live stream. So,
Alex, are you going to talk about backwards planning now?
Yes.
Have I got 5 minutes?
Yes, you have 5 minutes, and you won't be on the screen for it either.
Oh, then I could have done it without anyone noticing that I was disappearing. Never mind.
Just like I could have got away without the cat swipe at me.
Yeah, never
Same
mind.
thing. No, what's going on there? So I'm just going to start sharing my screen. I need to hide presenter view for that. So, something I want to talk about today is backwards planning, which is a subject that I am very passionate about, and I will be showing you an example and a way that you can actually show backwards planning within your assignment. So, this is part of a time management workshop that I had actually prepared to deliver, but I haven't delivered it yet. So this is the first outing of these slides. So, backwards planning, what is it? So, backwards planning is where you start planning your deadline, but you start backwards. So you look at the last thing that you want to do, and you work out what the steps are from the end to the start. And you break down what you need to do at each stage. So I'll show you an example of this afterwards, and I'll do a live demonstration, if that's what you'd like. So hopefully you understand exactly what I mean by this. So at each stage, you try and work out, okay, this is the deadline, this is when I want to submit, how long is each stage going to take me? And that way, you can work out a proper timeline, giving yourself enough time. Then, you'll know when you need to start, and how much work you need to do for each week. And if you realise, oh, I should have started 2 weeks ago, that can then help give you the kickstart to get on with it and start, and to make a timeline that works. And then hopefully you'll realise that this is something that needs to be started on now if you want to get it in and properly done. And also, it can help you to plan the time for things like proofreading, referencing, and all the other important and relevant things that you might otherwise miss out time for. I've said I'll go through an example in Blackboard because I made these, I planned to do this in Blackboard initially, but I will now go through it in, that's the wrong one, I'll now go through it in Word. So, on screen, and it doesn't look very beautiful from what I can see. It looks like the, oh, hello again, welcome back to the live stream, my cat. So, on screen, if I just check to make sure I can see it, yes, I can see it quite nicely on my phone, and you can also see what my cat's typing. No, please don't go there, Gimli. I guess she's currently trapped in here with me, and that's not good. So, if we start from the start date, if we start from the actions and we start at the end, we can then enter in what the different steps are to help us get there. So, in this assignment, or this essay that I've said it's a 2,000 word essay, and it's due in for the 31st of January 2020. So the first thing we're going to enter in is, she's currently scratching at my cables. Due date of assignment. And that is to be completed for the 31st, 31/01/2020. Someone may point out there isn't a 31st of January. That's not something I've checked. So if there isn't, I apologise. So the start date of that action is then something that I want to fill in next. So I'd probably want to hand my paper in a few days early. So I might say I want to hand in paper is the next step. So working backwards to forwards. So I'd probably say I want to hand that in by the 28th. That way, if something comes up, I have a buffer in place. So with the start date, that would probably be a week before that. You don't need to worry about that too much at the moment. I've spotted an error. So 2021, because otherwise I'm in the past. So now what I'd recommend doing is work out each different step before this. So I would think, okay, I want a week before the deadline to proofread, to finish proofreading. So I would say proofread. So I would want to finish proofreading and have the essay ready to submit a week before. So therefore I'd probably say the 24th. Okay, cheers for knocking over my desk, my pen pot. She doesn't usually terrorise me this much, which is my cat. So proofreading needs to be done by then, and then go backwards. So after proofreading, the next thing I probably want is to reference and also have to have fresh eyes. Break from assignment. And I want to have a gap between when those things are due in for. So I might say the 21st of the 1st, 2021, and so on. And so I then go backwards, and I'm just going to do that by inserting a number of rows. So I would then insert some rows above it. Oops. I then start inserting some various rows to fill in what I need to do and when. And hopefully you'll get the picture from here. So after I've done the break from assignment, I then want to write first draft. I then want to, after I've done, before my first draft, I want to finish planning.
I think we can definitely hear Gimli moving around.
That's me typing currently.
Oh, is that you typing?
Yeah, it's right next to the mic, I'm afraid. So I want to finalise the essay plan. Before that step, I would like to do research and start planning. And before that, I might want to understand the question. So this is a basic structure. Each one of these, I would recommend coming up with sub-questions and sub-rows beneath them for what you need to do to accomplish that goal. But I would start working backwards with your timeline and work out how long you think each stage will take. I think that some of these stages will take, let's say writing a first draft of an essay after I've done my research. I might give myself a week to do that and think, okay, it might take me a week to actually write it. If it's taking me a week to write, I want to take into account the fact that I might have delays. Other things happen in the world. I'm not just writing this first draft. So I will try to think about how long it will take me realistically, and then I'll give myself about an additional half of that time. So if I've said it's taking me 7 days to do, I might give myself 10 days to do it. That way, if something does happen, I'm in a position to be okay. So for each stage, you then want to have a look at when you should start. After you finish saying when you complete it, then think about, okay, well, when do I want to start it for that buffer timeline to be done? And that way, after you finish going backwards to forwards, the essay will actually have a plan that you can follow that should give you more than enough time to do each single step. I would show you a completed version, and next time, given hindsight, I probably should transition between different versions. So I might have a version where I start writing the things, and I might have a version where I've written everything in. But hopefully you can see, by backwards planning, you can create a roadmap of your assessment and each different stage, when it needs to be completed by, and what to do. That way, you've got access to me. Reconnection. Can everyone write in the chat if I'm still here? Because I just said it's disconnected from OBS.
Oh, I can see you playing with your OBS settings. Oh, but now it's...
So we're now back on screen, Naomi.
We're back streaming.
Yeah.
That was a real technical difficulty.
Yeah, it was. So I should probably say the technical issue slide. So yeah, has anyone got any questions about backwards planning? If you do, write them in the chat. But hopefully you can see why it's worth doing, because you can create yourself a roadmap, you know what you're going to do, and you can then get in your head a firm timeline to follow and complete.
I was just thinking, Alex, have we got a template of this on the skills guide? Because we could put like a blank one in, not a blank one, but one that's got some of those key things, like
key steps that the people can then break down.
Final draft, proofreading suggestions.
Yes.
And then people could add in their own dates and stuff and extra things.
So
we could do that.
When I made this yesterday, I actually did think that I should probably put this on there, and that will be something good to do. So yeah. So what time is it now? It's now 20 past. So now into the section where we showcase some further resources and answer any questions that you might have.
If anyone's got a question. Oh yes, Alana's talking about Gantt charts. You can do those in all kinds of fancy ways, can't you, Gantt charts? Excel can do Gantt charts quite well, I think. And Microsoft Project, but I don't know if we've got Microsoft Project in Office 365. I might have a look.
Yes, have a look, Naomi.
I will have a look.
Yes. So yeah, if you haven't got any questions, feel free to write them into the chat. But whilst we're just waiting, I might showcase some further resources. And one of the key things that I would like to showcase is our upcoming week of events called StudyFest. So, if I just go back to the library homepage again, and I turn on my screen capture, so you can now see the library homepage. From here,
exciting news: MS Project is in Office 365 apps.
Maybe we should start doing some resources about that then. So from the library homepage, we've got, this is how you can access our upcoming events for our events called StudyFest.
Yes, StudyFest.
So if
we need a StudyFest jingle.
Okay, well if you and Dr. Zels want to make that, then go ahead. So library. So from the library homepage, scroll down and go to cat knocking things over. And go to Academic and Research Skills Workshop, which is slightly further down on the page. If you click on this, it will then take you to our calendar events. You can see all of our YouTube live streams here, but recently we've added in a lot of events, a large quantity of events for StudyFest. And Naomi has been a plethora, a range of events. And these vary from not just the skills team events, but all the university services. And it's a really good opportunity to learn new things and enhance your knowledge. So, as you can see, they've only been up, so there's only a few bookings, so there's lots of spaces left if you would like to sign up for them. Each of these sessions will be recorded, so if you do sign up and you can't make the session, then you'll still get a recording sent to you, or the ability to watch it back after the event. I don't know if all of them will be. Some of the POC Learning ones might not be, but I'll let Naomi speak on that.
Yes, well, actually, I want to speak. We've had a question.
Asking
about backwards planning and how that applies if you're running behind. And Tim's answered this a bit. I can hear Gimli. Gimli's got opinions. Tim's answered this a bit as well, and I absolutely agree with what Tim said.
The live stream.
So, are we still online? Shall I carry on talking?
Yeah, you keep talking. I just started showing the wrong things.
So, yes, I think all these things become more and more important. The further behind you are, the more important getting that planning is, I'm afraid. It's writing an assignment is difficult to cut out key bits of the process, although obviously you can, but that will have an impact on the assignment itself. So you just need to be more organised, I think. Take a realistic look at your backwards plan if that's what you're going to do. It might be that you cut out that extra time allowance that Alex was talking about, so don't give yourself any extra time allowance and try and minimize other things in your life that might impact on writing your assignment, I guess. But yes, the later you are with things, the more organized you need to be, definitely.
Backwards planning, something that I would have mentioned earlier but I forgot to because I was being distracted, was that with your backwards plan, if you write that at the start of the assessment, don't just stick to it rigidly. If things need to change and something's delayed, rethink that structure and rethink how it's going to work. No, don't go up there, Gimli, you're going to get trapped. Come down. So, if you are doing your backwards planning, rethink and restructure it if you are behind. But if you are running behind, that is when planning, as Tim said, becomes so important. Don't just necessarily tie it on the to-do dates, but just work out what needs to be done and when, and how you can do that in a way that works for you.
Maybe we're streaming again next week, as we're streaming every week here on your internet at 12:30 to 1:30 every Wednesday. Tim and I are doing next week's stream. Maybe Tim, we can talk about time management. That would be a good focus for it. And Tim can talk about the Derby Diamond, and it will all be wonderful. But that might be a good topic for next week. Talk about time management over the course of an assignment.
Something that I was going to propose that we do in not the one after the session that the live stream that we did after StudyFest. So we're doing a live stream in StudyFest about academic writing. But the one after that, I was going to propose that we do a session on what do you do if you are running behind with your assignment. So what actions can you take? What do you do in the heat of the moment? The answer is I have to think about that and to come up with some solid advice, but that was something I was thinking about doing in the future. So if you want to do that the week before Study Fest or something like that, I think that would be really good.
I think that would be good. We'll make that. I've decided I'm making a decision because Tim hasn't replied in the chat yet that I can see because I'm 10 seconds ahead. I'm 10 seconds ahead of Tim, so I'm making a decision. Next week in the live stream, we'll talk about that. So if you want to pop back for next week's live stream, we'll explore that in more detail. We can talk about time management generally for your day. We can talk about managing your assignment in the ways that you just asked. We'll have a focus for that. And Tim knows that he's in trouble if I start calling him Dr. Zelstra. Dr. Zelstra has made an atrocious suggestion in the chat about a cage for the size of a cat. Cats do not go in cages. They don't like it. The cat is in charge of the household. The cat is the number one priority. That's the rule.
Yes, I do agree. So if anyone has enjoyed this live stream today and you are new here, or if you are a regular who hasn't subscribed yet, do consider subscribing to our YouTube channel today. Hopefully we won't be having cats attack us in the future, but hopefully if you have enjoyed the session and thought it useful, we do stream every week and they are announced on the YouTube channel as well as our events calendar. But if you do ring the bell as well, you get notified when we go live. So it could be a good way to keep in touch. All of our live streams as well as our video content stays on YouTube asynchronously, so you can access it on demand. And we're also going to be cutting up some of our workshops that we've done and putting some key parts onto YouTube. And we've done that already a few times. So we've got a video about understanding the question on our YouTube channel. So if I just transition to that, which has some slides to what the discussion that me and Naomi had was. That could be, again, useful if you just want to revise what we've said today. So that went up on our channel recently.
Tim's calling us weird cat people. I think actually for cat people that's quite normal behaviour. A normal attitude. That is normality for cat people.
But yeah, thank you very much for everyone who's watched this. If you've got any questions, any further questions, feel free to tell us. Has anyone got any further questions other than do you want to cage your cat? Yay for the time management stream. I'm glad that you think that's be useful. So that'll be what's happening next week.
We'll definitely do that next week.
In the Alexless stream, that is next week.
Yes, we're giving Alex a week off.
Well, you're not giving me a week off. You're giving me a live stream off.
Yeah, live stream off. Yeah, no,
I'll still be at work. I'll still be at work during the live stream. I just won't be in the live stream for that time. But yeah, I hope everyone's enjoyed it. If you have, like I say, feel free to subscribe to the channel. If you really do want to like the video, that also helps us to get distributed further and further people to see it, and you get to recommend it on YouTube. But yeah, if you've got any recommendations for other things you might want us to cover, so I think we've currently got time management and we've got fast reading that we've got in the future planned. I'm so sorry, Gimli. I'm nearly done.
Alex, I think you should go and feed Gimli.
So
I think that is the sign that this stream is over. So
for the sake of my cat, I want to say goodbye to everyone watching. Thank you very much, Naomi, for helping run this live stream today. Oh no, she's behind me. She's actually going to get on stream. She's getting on stream. She's done it. She's done it. She's made it. She's knocking off. I think she might have knocked over some things, but she's made it. So those who are sticking on in the chance of a cat, you got your wish.
We should definitely add Gimli to the descriptions.
So yeah, thank you very much for watching today's live stream. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.
Bye.
I just realised that we've still got audio coming out of this.
Her little face just peeping through your certificates. Bless her.